this sitting on the floor trying a booktuber look, huh? Hi, I'm Mel. I participated in Vlogmas in 2020, and let me tell ya, it's really hard to vlog all the time. But one thing that I did like about vlogging that I think I want to carry over is that when I was talking about the books, if I was doing a readathon or if I had some books to discuss, then I was able to kind of chat with you and talk to you about them as I was reading them and as I was experiencing them and as I was having thoughts and ideas on them. When it came to do my wrap up for the month, I had kind of forgotten a lot of what was said or forgotten a lot about what I read, or, you know, it was so much later, so much had gone on. So I think I want to go back to trying to do a vlog style wrap up. I only did this once before, I think, maybe in October. It was nice. We got to be out in the greenhouse. That was a fun time. The first book that I finished in January was The Umbrella Academy Hotel Oblivion, which is the third book in the Umbrella Academy graphic novel series. I've read the previous first two. The mistake that I made with this one was that I haven't read the first two in a really, really long time, and I didn't remember how the second one ended, and I didn't remember a lot of where things kind of left off. And then also, in the meantime, I watched the show, and I can't remember how much the show really follows the first two books. I remember when Umbrella Academy first came out and it was so awesome. Like, it was just like blew me away. It was so good. I was so excited to pick it up. And then the second one, I remember feeling like, oh, it's not quite as exciting and interesting, and it relies a little bit heavily on some of the things that the first one did that were so innovative and new, but in the second one weren't quite as much. And then I felt the same way about this one as well. Like, I think this one kind of went off the momentum and the vibe of the first books and fell a little short on like actual plot and story. Now, again, is that because I don't really remember what happened in the second book? This one feels like it starts in the middle and it feels like it has stories going on that aren't fully explained. So it could be that that is true, or it could be that I just don't remember what led up to these events, and that is why I feel that way. Overall, I would always highly suggest these books. I think they're so great. I think the artwork is really interesting, and I think the writing is really interesting. I think the show is really fun too, so I would suggest, if you like the show, reading the books, and if you like the books, watching the show. They're very different, but I think the overall kind of rock and roll vibe and the look at found family and the look at kind of like superheroes in the modern day and, you know, the flaws of superheroes, and then also that idea of children being raised to be perfect is just an interesting idea, an interesting concept overall. I think a lot of, you know, comic books deal with this, of course. There's like Franklin of the Fantastic Four, and there's the Generation X kids and like all that stuff, but I think that this one is a little bit more hip, and they're a little bit more of a ragtag team, and they're a little bit more, I don't know, they curse a lot more, and they're just like a little bit more of a like a modern day and like a action movie kind of. So anyway, if you're into that, I definitely suggest it. I would only suggest reading them in order, and I would suggest reading them in quick succession. We've talked about this before. The next book that I read in January was Woodswomen. This is a nonfiction true story of a young woman in the 60s and 70s who moves to the Adirondacks at first to work in a camp with her husband. It's a kind of like hotel slash camp. There's horseback riding, fishing, etc., that her husband runs. She works there initially in the summers as a teenager. She falls in love with the owner. They get married. And then this story of Woodswomen follows shortly after they're divorced, and she is forced to leave the camp, and she decides that instead of going back to a conventional life, she is going to build a log cabin in the woods in the Adirondack Mountains in New York State, and she's going to live alone, and she is going to become a woodswoman. The idea really is to create a life that you want that is outside of society, but without removing yourself from society entirely. So building your own home and creating your own space and living sustainably and living self-sufficiently and having to deal with the things that you can't get away from in society, but being able to be happy and live to your personal requirements and pleasures and spiritualities, all those things that are going to make you a whole and happy person, living a much slower life. You know, those are things that I definitely like crave and strive for. I'm obviously not moving to the mountains and building my own log cabin. Not yet. This one was interesting because it does deal a lot with the idea of a woman doing this on her own. And LeBastille really like goes off on her own. Like, she really has no idea what she's doing, no training, puts no thought in it. She just goes to the mountains. She doesn't know how she's going to do anything. She gets tons of stuff wrong. She almost dies several times. She almost kills people several times. And she just gets through it. So I don't know if that's necessarily to be admired. She is a conservationist, but she's not trying to save the world. She's just trying to save certain things that she enjoys. I think LeBastille is really more trying to see where she can help, but she does not take necessarily as much sustainability into mind. She does not take as much community into mind. She does things that result in really dangerous environments or really impractical things without really thinking about them, just to achieve, you know, doing what she wants to do. For instance, when she first, this is, you know, not spoilers, it's real life, but when she first buys her property, she doesn't find out any of the ordinances or anything. So she builds her cabin too close to the lakefront, and then she potentially could lose everything that she worked for because she just was too brash and didn't pay attention to the things that she needed to. She didn't like going to the lawyer, so she didn't read the fine print. And you're kind of like, well, that would have benefited you more. And I think that in this book, one of the reoccurrences is that she doesn't really, she might learn that specific lesson. Yes, if she has to sign another contract, she's going to go back and she's going to look at it, but she doesn't learn that lesson in the greater sense that helps her become a better person or a better member of her small community, because she continually makes mistakes like that and has to learn by doing, then doesn't kind of carry those over into the next different situation, but that could have similar, or at least could have consequences that maybe she could have learned from in the first place. I really love this book. It doesn't sound like it, but I did. And it's a beautiful old copy from the 70s, and it was really fun to read. It follows on the theme of sustainability and how you can live within your means and within your community and society, but by making your own way and creating your own definitions for what life should be like, and then fulfilling those definitions by the way that you live. The third book that I read was called Emergency Skin, and it was a short story on audio. I think books like Whoa turn me on to we'll just call it the A word. If you have the A shopping place, you can get some free short stories from them on audio. I've listened to 2 so far. One was the Jeffrey Deaver book that I listened to in December, and this one was by N.K. Jemison. It's called Emergency Skin. So it's a short story about an AI taking a volunteer to the surface of a long dead planet to retrieve some necessary biological materials to take back to their new society. So these people left this planet, it was in ruins, it was being destroyed, and they left the planet and they moved on and created a different society. And the whole story is told only through the AI, and it's like the AI is inside your head the way it's inside the volunteer's head. He's talking to you and he's saying like, okay, now do this, and if you do this, you'll get this reward. If you go down and get these biological materials, you'll be rewarded by being able to have your skin. Through that, you kind of figure out that society is not cool and they're totally using the volunteer, and it's kind of just this journey of how you as the volunteer come to realize the real motivations behind the AI and the society that he is working for. Both the short stories that I've listened to from there, I like broke up into a couple of different listening sessions, and they are so short they might just be best to just go ahead and listen to all at once, because the same thing kind of happened with the last one where I stopped in the middle and then I had to like kind of go back and like rethink what it was and like re-listen to some of the things because I couldn't quite remember what was going on. What I think I like about these stories the most is that they give me the ability as a new booktuber to be able to test out some of the authors that I've heard about, but I'm not necessarily sure if I want to dive into their whole books. So N.K. Jemison wrote the 5th season, and everybody on BookTube talks about it. This was a good introduction to her work, you know, it was like a little taste of what her work might be like. So I enjoyed that part of it. I feel the same with Jeffrey Deaver. I didn't love that book, but I would definitely go back and see what else he wrote and maybe read some of his other stuff. So those were the first 3 books that I read in January, and that is my thoughts on them pretty soon after I read them. I read a few more books in January, so I wanted to pop in here. Marty's right here, you can't see him. I read The Murders of Molly Southbourne. I read it in like a day and a half. Obviously it's like very, very short, and I read this on the recommendation of Books and Lala. She really liked this one, and it seemed like really weird and interesting and sci-fi and dark and horror and really interesting. Really did like it. And the whole time I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's very visceral. It's very gross. It's very disturbing. I don't think this is spoilers, but it's one of those books that like starts at the end and then you go back right away to the beginning and then you hear the whole story to the end, where you came in the first place. And you know that right away. Like, you know it from the minute you start reading the book that it's like gonna go take you back to the place where you start. So like right before that, this thing happens and it like kind of blew my mind, like left an impression on me. Like I've never said this before in my entire life, but like, you know the phrase that people say, I'm shook? I was shook. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it for like 4 days. I definitely want to read the sequel, and I guess it's like a series, so I'm definitely going to read that. But I mean, you have to be okay with like the violence and the gore and the horror and the body horror and the sexual component as well. But if you are okay with that, I would definitely suggest reading this. It's like such a short, fast glimpse into this world that you're like, and then I'm telling you, like, that part at the end, I was just like, you're blowing my mind right now, and it was really good. So, and then I also read Red Dwarf, which I thought was really weird, because it was written after the TV series, and it was just a rehashing of the TV series, and it ends on, like, a crazy cliffhanger, which is very weird. I thought it was a little too many, like, pop culture references, and really, like, dated itself because of that. I'm going to read the next one. I have it. I'm looking for it used, so I'm going to get that. I'm going to read the next one, and I think in the meantime I'm going to watch the show while I'm waiting for that one to show up. Overall, I would say watch the show, don't read the book, because the book wasn't as interesting as the show, and although the show is dated, it's also like really funny. This had some like funny moments in it, but I think that it being as dated as it was, and like that it's basically the same as the show if you like the show. But if you don't like the show, I don't know how much you would really get out of it. So I would say watch the show, don't read the book. But I'm going to read the second book. That was some crazy lighting in the last clip, I think. I didn't realize when I filmed it how intense the light flares were. But I kind of like that. Like, I like light flares. I'm very, you know, I like Joss Whedon. I like light flares, whatever. Those were all the books that I read in January. I only read 5 books in January. I thought I was going to finish 2 or 3 more before the end of January, so I held off on filming this final clip. I literally have like 30 pages left, but it's like a philosophy spirituality book, and I'm just like struggling to get through the like last part of it. Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, Red Dwarf by Grant Naylor. I read The Murders of Molly Southbourne by Tade Thomson. I read Woodswomen by LeBastille. I read The Umbrella Academy by Gerald and Gabrial. And I read N.K. Jemison's short story Emergency Skin. Overall, January, not a crazy reading month, but not bad. I really enjoyed almost all of what I've read. For the month of January, I did work on one of my goals. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I read a Latinx illustrator, Black male author, N.K. Jemison is a Black female author, and the book that I'm currently reading is also by a person of color, so I've already started reading more varied books, more books by people of color, more books by marginalized authors, so I'm really excited about that. I kind of, again, like just having that in your mind mindfully kind of manifested those books to myself, which is awesome. So I hope you had a great reading month in January, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye!